Yeah, let's start by chanting Om 3 times, and then we'll do a little responsive chant. So it's best if all of you there are muted, but we can all chant Om together 3 times, just closing our eyes. And as we chant these mantras, to feel that we're coming together, attuning ourselves to the ground of being that we all share. We can actually chant responsively a chant that Swami Shivananda would sing in English that encapsulates so much of the teachings of integral yoga. Serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize.
Serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize.
Do good, be kind, and be compassionate.
Be good, do good, be kind, and be compassionate.
Inquire, who am I? Know thyself and be free.
Inquire, who am I? Know the self and be free.
Adapt, adjust, accommodate.
Adapt, adjust, accommodate.
Bear insult, bear injury, highest sadhana.
Bear injury, bear insult, highest sadhana.
Serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize.
Serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize.
Do good, be kind, and be compassionate.
Do good, be kind, and be compassionate.
Inquire, who am I? Know the self and be free.
Inquire, who am I? Know the self and be free.
Adapt, adjust, accommodate.
Adapt, adjust, accommodate.
Bear insult, bear injury, highest sadhana.
Bear insult, bear injury, highest sadhana.
Om Shanti. Thank you, Premananda.
My joy.
I wanted to share that chant just because of the way it so much includes what integral yoga is, an integration of all the various paths of yoga. And each of them has been an important teaching in my own life. And that's what I was excited to share tonight, just to talk about the teachings that really impacted me as a young person and even as I got older. And of course, I don't want to just talk about myself. I want to talk about these teachings and how they can completely transform the way that we experience ourselves, understand ourselves, the way that we interact in the world, the way that we live day to day, our state of being, our wellness, our health, our happiness, the entirety of our lives. So I'll share some of these things, and I'll do more next week because I have a pretty good list of these things. And I invite questions and comments from you all as I go through it, especially if anything's confusing. But if something really resonates with you and you have an example of it or something from your own life you want to share, I welcome that. The first teaching I want to share, the first thing that as a young person really had a profound effect on me was to realize that I am not my thoughts. I have thoughts. They can really dominate the mind, but that's not who I am, this combination of thoughts. The reason I thought of that, to speak about that first, is because that's one of the first kind of spiritual experiences I had with yoga. I had taken a yoga class once before, but it wasn't an integral yoga class. And it was actually taught in French language. And I don't remember too much about that class. It was just enough to get me interested. But in 1975, in Louisville, Kentucky, in a kind of new agey center on Frankfurt Avenue, my brother and I took an integral yoga class. And I had this like moment where my jaw dropped. I couldn't understand what I was experiencing. As I look back, I was simply experiencing my mind being a little bit quiet, not perfectly quiet. It wasn't samadhi. It wasn't God realization, but my mind was a little bit quiet in a way that I'd never experienced before. And I remember leaving the class and not wanting to speak because I was still trying to figure out what I was experiencing. And I just think, even though I speak about that as it happened many years ago, it's such a useful thing for all of us to be aware of now, to be aware of all the time, that we don't have to be governed by, dominated by, identified with these thoughts that we have in the mind. I was reading the other day something on the news about someone being charged with DUI. You all know what that stands for, driving under the influence. And I had this thought, we all are guilty of what I would call TUI, thinking under the influence. And when I say thinking under the influence, I mean thinking under the influence of the prevailing messages of the culture that are so ingrained in our hearts and minds, we can't escape it. A lot of the ways that we have come to understand ourselves and the world is built on the messages of our culture, which, according to the Yoga Sutras, the teachings of yoga, is basically avidya, the absence of true knowledge or ignorance of our true nature. So we're all charged with TUI, and it's so helpful for us to understand that we don't have to let the mind and its thoughts prevail in the way that we go about our lives. We don't have to obey them. We don't have to be subject to them. There used to be a saying in the hallway of the New York Institute. I'm not sure if it's still there. And I think it was a saying from the Buddha, and it was something about how, hear, O sons and daughters, your cruel master exists not. Mm-hmm. And it was just basically saying, the cruel master, your thought forms, are not real. I like comparing it to the clouds in the sky, which, if the clouds are thick, covering the sky, they dominate the environment that we live in, that we walk in. It makes the sky dark. It's kind of, it blocks the sun. It has an effect on our mood. But if you get in an airplane and fly through those clouds, you see the clouds actually have no substance. If you're on the beach in San Francisco and the fog rolls in, it's basically clouds, but there's really nothing there. The ego mind is much the same way. It has no real substance, but it can cloud the mind in such a way that it distorts and prevents us from experiencing the inner light. I like that analogy. A friend said something the other day that echoed this from a teacher named Byron Katie. He quoted Byron Katie as having said, "Don't get me wrong, I love my thoughts, but I wouldn't dream of believing them." I really like that. And I Googled it. I think she might have gotten it from the Upanishads somewhere. I think it dates back before Byron Katie. But I just like that comment because it's levity. And that's one of the things I so much appreciated about Sri Gurudev, Sri Swami Satchidananda, my guru, that he managed to help us laugh at ourselves as he delivered the teachings, rather than feel guilty or ashamed of ourselves. And he taught us that it's possible, not only are we not our thoughts, but it's possible for us to experience ourselves outside of the thinking mind. And he taught us how to do it. And that was the beauty of the integral yoga class that I took in 1975 that still works today. It's this combination of mindful movement, deep relaxation, pranayama, and meditation in a way that's guided by the yama and niyama of the 8 limbs of yoga. It's done with a real awareness not to cause any harm, to be honest with ourselves, to be content with the body mind as it is, and to accept some self-discipline. So I see that the aspects of the Yoga Sutras that are incorporated into the way that we're guided to practice that class. And that's the beauty of that teaching. It's not just something that we can know intellectually, but we can experience on a regular basis with a regular practice. Maybe in a few minutes after we've talked a little more, we'll actually do some practice together. I also wanted to share something that I thought was an excellent description of what we call what you might call the ego mind. This is from a teacher named Tara Brach, and her book is Radical Acceptance. I want to read a paragraph from her book about the mind and the ego and the way it forms itself into a persona. She writes, what we experience as the self is an aggregate of familiar thoughts, emotions, and patterns of behavior. The mind binds these together, creating a story about a personal, individual entity that has continuity through time. Everything we experience is subsumed into this story of self and becomes my experience. I am afraid. This is my desire. This is my possession. Gurudev often talked about my, so many minds that we set up around ourselves. I just like that definition. I think it very beautifully depicts this idea that under the influence of our culture, we create this idea about who we are, how the world works, and that tends to govern the way that we relate to the world. And we filter new information. We see or perceive new things through the clouds of that persona, that identity that we've created. And that's the beauty of a yoga practice that can enable us to experience ourselves separate from all of that mental activity, as the Inquire Yoga class and practice can do. So I have a suggestion as a practice of this idea, that is to give a name to your personal story that your mind has created, that your mind has formed. It's kind of a playful idea so that you don't take your mind and its thoughts so seriously. And the purpose is to be more selective about what we believe, what we trust, how we discern the difference between this deeply ingrained way of thinking about ourselves and the more natural inclination to be selfless, to be serviceful, to be compassionate. And Gurudev gave us a very good way of discerning or telling the difference between those two things. But I like the idea of giving a name or just calling it my story. And sometimes I can just see that what's been activated and what's going on is my story. And I know not to give that the weight of real truth and reality to that story. So it's a suggestion. I grew up in when I was a small child, cowboys and Indians was a popular kind of TV. And like many children my age, I had a holster with some guns and a cowboy hat that I would wear when I was like 3 or 4. I still remember pictures of it. And there were a lot of TV shows about that kind of heroic cowboy. So I playfully named my own story The Lone Arranger. Because of the tendency of the mind to be constantly trying to arrange everything in order to be happy and to make it all work out and to feel good and to be admired and to be successful and all that. The lone arranger. And it's just a way of being playful and laughing at my mind and its tendencies. All right, the second teaching that I want to talk about that had a profound effect on my life, and that is that everything that we do, literally everything that we do, can be yoga practice. I'm quite sure it's written somewhere in Swami Satchidananda's books, keep referring to as Gurudev, probably in the Golden Present, but I know I've seen it written in quotes in various places. Even your eating and sleeping can be yoga practice if you do it in order to keep yourself in good shape, in order to be of service in the world. That is such a profound understanding, and it has had such a profound impact on my life. Because we know how many people can focus on practicing and studying yoga all day long. Very few. Even the monks in our order are not sitting around studying the scriptures all day. We're working. Most people have to earn a living. So people are not going to be spending all their day on yoga, but the whole day can be yoga practice. They understand this concept that whatever they do can be turned into yoga practice if it's done for your own well-being or for the well-being of others. Now, I'll tell a little story about this that some of you may have heard me tell before. When I first moved to the ashram in 1979, and I took pre-monastic vows, my first job was working in the kitchen at the ashram in Connecticut. There was a kitchen mother, and myself and another man, we were kind of the assistants. We did a lot of chopping and preparing of things, and we ended up, putting out the meals. It was a very full job. And I enjoyed it for the most part, but I was very new. I had a lot to learn, and I sometimes got resentful when it felt like we were working very hard. And there was one particular weekend that I remember. It was a special weekend when there was some kind of special retreat going on, and there were a lot of people with special dietary needs. And so the work in the kitchen was more than usual, preparing extra things and different things than we normally would. And I heard that Gurudev was in the temple room, the place where we would meditate and have satsang. He was in that room meeting with people, and then anyone could join them, but I was too busy to, because I was kind of stuck in the kitchen working longer into the evening than usual. So I got a little bit irritable about that and felt sorry for myself. Oh, other people are getting to relax and be with Swamiji, and I can't. I'm stuck here working. Finally, there was a break in the action. And by this point, I was kind of like in a bad mood. And I don't know what else was going on, but I decided to go off and be by myself. And I had kind of a grumpy feeling in my mind and a dark cloud over my head, feeling sorry for myself, and also feeling bad about what I was feeling. I know it wasn't very yogic to feel that way, but I did anyway. So I was walking around like that by myself in the backyard of the ashram. Very soon, right in front of me, walking not in my direction, but walking in a kind of perpendicular direction to me, was Swami Satchidananda. There he was, by himself. I'm alone. There he is. That's exactly what I wanted, was to see him or to be around him. But I didn't know what to say. I was kind of new, and I kind of pranamed and looked at him, and he didn't even look my way. He just walked down the pathway right in front of me. And I felt like, oh, no, I missed my opportunity to interact with him or to say something. I didn't know what to say. And now I felt even more kind of confused, because there he was, but I didn't have an opportunity or reason to interact with him. And I just felt like I missed my opportunity. So as I continued to walk, somebody spotted me on the back porch of the ashram and asked me about finding something in the kitchen. And the next thing I know, I'm back in the kitchen and back working in the kitchen, helping to prepare something. But now it was such a relief to be doing something useful, because those 10 or 15 minutes that I spent walking around by myself, kind of in a dark mood and irritated and resentful, that was no fun. And then seeing Gurudev and not knowing what to say was kind of confusing. And now finally, I was focused and doing something useful, and I started to just relax and enjoy myself, and even chant one of the chants that I like. And then I had this aha moment. Oh, this is what they mean by the joy of serving, like karma yoga. I'd heard it talked about. I'd already taken a teacher training program. I knew the concept, but I felt like, wow, this is what I mean. But just relax and enjoy your service. You don't have to be doing something special. You can enjoy this work itself can be enjoyable. And just as I had that kind of real strong feeling, and I was alone in the kitchen, I also got the sense that somebody was behind me. And I turned around, and Swami Satchidananda had opened the kind of back door to the kitchen. Premananda will know, she's been to the Connecticut ashram. There was a kind of back door to the kitchen, and he was just peeking. He didn't come in. He was just peeking at me just at that moment. And then he closed the door and walked away. And then I thought, oh my God, does he know what I'm thinking? Who knows? But that was an example of how I felt he was there guiding my experience at Yogaville. And I continued to feel that throughout my many years within Integral Yoga, that Gurudev was there behind the scenes, guiding the experience, not in any overt way, creating miracles that were visible, but just seeing to it that I got the lessons that I needed to learn and grow. So that's a little story from my life. But the point I want to make that I think is useful for all of us is that we have a choice always, no matter what we're doing, to somehow make it part of our spiritual practice, to put love into it, whatever we're doing, to think of the well-being of others, to give ourselves wholeheartedly to what we're doing, to make it much more enjoyable and meditative. Who was it? Carolyn, just before we started, was asking about my visit to Rich Panico and Manjula in Georgia. While I was there with them, I think at least 3 different occasions, I was on the riding mower mowing the lawn, because they have quite a large field and a number of different yards that have to be mowed. And I quite enjoy it. And I found that it was very meditative, because you're constantly focused on this riding mower going at the right speed with the right speed for the blades and the right height for the blades according to the grass that you're cutting, and trying to keep a nice even row so that it looks nice when you're done. And I really had a great time. It was a good example for me. I had a great time mowing the lawn. I completely lost track of time because I was so engaged in the present. Anyway, it was just an interesting recent example in my life of how something you might not consider enjoyable can be with the right attitude. The world that we live in is so oriented around productivity, accomplishing things, ticking things off a list. It's amazing how strongly that has influenced the way that we live. And it's natural for each of us to go through different phases in our lives when we're busier, and it is our dharma, our duty to do things, to get things done, to be in a position to take care of our families, to earn a living, etc. But there are also times, and you've just entered one of those times when we might have the space to practice more deeply and to really dwell in that spiritual presence that we encounter when we practice. There's a word that's often used to translate the third sutra in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, to abide in its own nature, right? The self abides in its own nature, or we can abide in that nature. And that is also an important service in our world, to practice and abide in that spiritual presence, the energy of that presence, the light, the sense of oneness. I forget where I heard this idea, but I really like this idea that, in Christianity, there's talk of the second coming of Christ. And I once heard this idea that actually the second coming of Christ is when each of us gives birth to that Christ consciousness, manifests or expresses that consciousness in ourselves into the world, from within ourselves into the world. I think that's a beautiful analogy, or a beautiful way of thinking of it. Even here in the Institute and at the ashram, where I have lived before as well, when someone wanted to really keep silence in the midst of other people who were talking, they would wear a simple badge that says keeping silent. And most people, even people that are not yogis, most people would not be offended by that when it's an intentional practice for spiritual purpose. Many people might be inspired by it and respect it. So I'd encourage you not to be shy about that inclination that you have because of the way it may even influence others in a healthy way. Yeah, someone wants to meet with you on a certain day and you say, oh, that's a time when I'm practicing silence. They might be interested to know more about it. Instead of you feeling like maybe you shouldn't mention it or you have to be low key about it, it's a beautiful practice. In fact, you know that in the yoga tradition, the word mauna is intentional silence for spiritual purpose. And Gurudev encouraged us to practice that, to regularly practice periods of mauna as a part of our spiritual practice. Even when when I was living in New York, running the institute there, when it was very busy, even then, he suggested that I should set aside some time to practice mauna that way. That's also one of the reasons that he created the integral yoga retreats, so that we had an opportunity to practice it together to experience being in relationship, but in silence. It's a beautiful practice. I think there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, yes. You actually reminds me of another thing that I wanted to talk about as a spiritual practice, and that is listening. The ego mind, in the midst of conversation, the ego mind is always ready to comment, to express our point of view, to be right, to know the answer, to stand out. The ego mind is all about that. It's hard for us to escape that tendency. It's a beautiful practice to really focus on listening. And that, to me, is a form of karma yoga. When we listen with real interest in what's happening with another person, we give them the space, the safety, the attention to allow them to reflect on themselves and to be able to talk about whatever they need to process for themselves. So I find that that's a very interesting form of karma yoga, listening. Somewhere a few weeks ago, someone mentioned this, I forget what you call it, when the four letters of a word spell out four different words also. And the example was wait, and it stands for W-Y-A-M-I-T, talking. Why am I talking? I really like that. To question ourselves. Is there a reason why I'm talking? Or am I just bubbling out all of my thoughts without real intention and without any clear motive other than focusing on myself and my story. So I like that as one of the practices of karma yoga. Mother Teresa said something beautiful that I also think of with regard to this topic of karma yoga. That is, we cannot do great things, but we can do small things with great love. I really like that idea. And Gurdjieff himself would set an example of even working on the car or working on something mechanical, cleaning something well, as something that's important. You know, in our culture, we might give a lot of importance to taking care of another person, but we don't give that much importance to taking care of inanimate things like the furniture or the dishes or the car. But they all respond to care, and they all deserve to be treated with care. That's to me such a all-encompassing teaching, because it's possible to practice no matter what we're doing. Gurdjieff even told a story of a sadhu. I only remember this story kind of vaguely, and Premananda, if you remember it better and you want to speak up and share something, please do. It was a story of, I think, of like a board member of some ashram was visiting the ashram and seeing what was happening there. And he noticed that a lot of people were helping in the ashram, doing various things. But there was one man who would sit off to the side in a corner, and he didn't seem to be doing any service of any kind. But when it came time to serve food, he was given more than the normal share that was given to others. Maybe it's when special sweets were being given out. He was been given 2 ladus instead of just 1, something like that. And he was curious about this guy that didn't seem to be doing any kind of work of any kind, yet he seemed to be treated with a great deal of respect and deference. And he asked about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's so-and-so. It's been that way for many, many years." And finally he felt like, well, just because it's been that way for many years, it shouldn't necessarily be that way. He decided to interact with this elder man who didn't seem to be serving any useful purpose. And the way I remember the story, and it's a little vague in my mind, I must confess, the way I remember the story, he spoke to that man and asked him, "Well, what is it that you do here?" And that man said, "Well, I really do nothing here. Keep my mind quiet, and that's my contribution." And this board member was like, "That's nothing. Anybody can do that. Anybody can keep their mind quiet. That's nothing." And they decided that they would sit there and see who could keep the mind quiet. And they sat there for a few minutes, and I forget exactly how long. And then this board member, "See, I could sit there keeping my mind quiet." And the elder man said, "But you were thinking about this and this and this." And he was reading the mind of this board member, whose mind was not quiet at all, and it was all preoccupied with his own story and his own ideas, and his own desires. And at that point, the board member, I think, pranamed at the feet of this elder man, whose mind was so empty and quiet that he actually was able to read the thoughts of this other man. I like that story. Yeah, I wish I remembered exactly more clearly, but I'm quite sure it came from Gurdjieff, and I'm pretty sure that man received 2 ladus instead of 1. But since none of you remember it, I can get away with it telling it that way. Let me pause here and actually guide us in a little practice. My intention tonight and next Thursday is that we not just talk, but we actually do a little practice together. And I want to, since we're right kind of in the middle of our time together, I want to do this now so that we don't run out of time to do it at the end. And I want to practice what I talked about in the beginning. It's possible for us to not be so caught up in our thoughts. And Swami Satchidananda Gurudev taught us many different ways to approach the practice of meditation. He did explain that there were many different ways to focus the mind, and that you could practice simply by witnessing. But he gave more emphasis to focusing on some kind of object, like watching the breath, or repeating a mantra. In particular, gazing would be another way of focusing. And the beauty of that kind of method is that we don't have to repress the thoughts. We don't have to try to stop them. We don't have to do anything about the thoughts. We simply direct our attention in a chosen direction. And by practicing redirecting our attention again and again, each time that it wanders, with patience, without disappointment, we gradually accomplish this task of freeing the mind from its habitual cycles of thought. Even though we're not paying attention to all of that thinking, we're not giving energy to it, it happens automatically by giving our full attention in a single direction. And the beauty of the Integral Yoga Hatha class is that the whole class becomes a meditative experience, working first with the physical level, then with the energy body, the pranic body, and the breath, and then with the mind. So we don't have time for a full class, but I'll work a little bit with the physical level and the breath and guide us a little bit in a practice. So let's do that. If you need to make any adjustment to your position to be able to sit comfortably, I encourage you to do that. And then if you're comfortable closing your eyes, that's also conducive to this practice. And let's start simply by adjusting the legs and feet so that they can be comfortable and relaxed. If you're seated on a chair or on the floor, either one, see that there's a little lift in the hips and the pelvis can tilt forward slightly. So the natural curve of the low back is intact. And if your legs are crossed on the floor, adjust them so they're comfortable. If you're sitting in a chair, you might still cross the ankles if that's comfortable. Just see that from the hips down is steady and relaxed. And then take note of the spine itself, that it's erect. The spine being the main skeletal structure that holds us upright. But there's an energetic flow as well between the pelvic floor and the top of the head. And we can align our physical posture around that core of energetic support. You can even feel that the head floats upward. And then give a little attention to the shoulders to make sure they're neither hunched forward or pinched back, but that the upper arms are draped right down alongside the rib cage. And the hands are relaxed. And if comfortable, you might even join the index finger and thumb. And see that the jaw and the cheeks are relaxed. The eyes can be soft. The forehead relaxed. And then even this area behind the eyes, inside the head. See if you can consciously soften that area. Visualize any tension, darkness, confusion, anything swirling around in the mind. Just feel it drain out of the head. Leaving it feeling light and relaxed. And then turn your attention now to watching the breath. Maybe take a few deep breaths. A really deep breath happens when you gently press the abdomen in on the exhale to complete the exhale. That makes room for a deeper inhale. And you can feel the abdomen expand, the side ribs, even the back ribs expand, and the inhale move all the way into the upper chest. Take a few deep breaths that way. Letting the breath be deep, slow, wave-like, and relaxed. And then let the breath return to normal without controlling it in any way. observe its natural, subtle rhythm. Now turn your attention to watching the thoughts that arise in the mind. For this, feel that you can step back, stand apart from whatever arises in the mind with a kind of curiosity, just to see, where does the mind gravitate on its own? And if you find yourself dwelling on any one of those thoughts that arise, come back to this position of a witness or an observer. The final step in this little practice, having seen what thoughts arise on their own, where our attention tends to go, make a conscious choice to step back from all of that and to give your full attention to either watching the breath or repeating a mantra. Many of you have practiced this many, many times. Allow yourself to rest from all of this thinking. No need to do anything, arrange anything, plan anything. Take a few minutes just to rest with the mind focused on your one chosen direction. You can open your eyes when you're ready. I know some of you have practiced this way many, many times. This is nothing new for you. I was thinking, anytime we come together in the name of the truth, it's always good to do a little practice together instead of just talk. I led a very simple practice that anyone could do anytime. And sometimes I like the wording to feel that you deserve the opportunity to rest from the thinking. I particularly like that way of expressing it. Tonight, I want to talk about one more special teaching that's been special for me. And I have three more to talk about next Thursday. But this teaching is something that was really important for me, and I still work with it. I would call it stopping the war within. What I mean by this is we all have situations in which we struggle. We all have moments when we get upset, disturbed, angry, or anxious. And it's interesting how we cope with those moments. These are excellent opportunities to learn, but it's very easy to get caught up in either blaming another person for the upset that I'm having, or feeling bad about it, being ashamed of myself for feeling that way or having that experience, as if I should know better. And of course, sometimes a little guilt is not a bad thing. When we make a mistake, that can be healthy. But to feel ashamed of ourselves and so guilty, so full of self-judgment that we don't learn from our mistakes, that's a mistake. And I see a lot of that in the students that I've taught, and I've seen it in myself. This tendency to not know how to work with the darkness that we end up seeing in ourselves. It gets exposed by life's challenges, our own impatience, our own attachment, our own desire. It gets exposed by different situations. We might think, oh, I'm really progressing. I've learned a lot. I'm really peaceful. But then some situation happens that even surprises us, how disturbed we might get. It's really been helpful for me over the years to learn more and more how it's important for me to be able to honestly look at my own darkness or my own struggle and learn from it. The analogy I like to share around this is that when we have a physical pain, we know that the pain itself is not the problem. The pain is what's calling our attention to something that's wrong in the body. Like when you have an infection, the pain is to call your attention to the fact that there's something wrong that needs to be treated. It needs healing. In the same way, when we have emotional pain, there's something wrong. That emotional pain, the upset, the anger, the anxiety, the fear, the depression, that's not the problem. That's the symptom. And what's needed is healing attention, is to inquire into it. What's behind that? Where did that come from? I think Gurdjieff has often said that ultimately our anger always relates back to something that we wanted that we're not getting. Our fear often relates to something that we hope to get that we're afraid we won't get. So it's often based on desire. But it doesn't help to simply simplify it. It really helps to allow ourselves to be with that feeling. That's something I had to learn. I can still remember that in 1990, when I was living here in San Francisco, the teacher, American teacher Ram Dass, gave a talk somewhere. I don't remember where, but I was surprised by one of the things he said. He said, in all my years of spiritual practice, I never really got rid of any of my neuroses, but I got to know them well, and I made friends with them. And I was just surprised that he said that. But his point was that he's capable of acknowledging them and looking at them and inquiring into the nature of them. And he used the example of pride. Oh, pride, there you are again, looking really proud of yourself. What's that about? Let's hear from you. Have a seat. Let's hear from you. What are you all about, right? What's your story? That's the way he was talking about it. That was really helpful for me to hear, that I didn't have to feel so bad about myself when I misbehaved, or I wasn't able to live by the teachings, when I was attached. And that, in fact, it was really important for me to allow myself to feel what I was feeling and allow the energy of that feeling to flow, to move, to release. Not that I gave energy to it, that I just allowed it to be there instead of repressing it, feeling bad about it, judging it, or avoiding it. Or instead of letting it explode by magnifying it or repressing it, just to be in neutral, to be a loving brother or sister to my own hurting mind. That's been an important teaching for me. Somebody said, I don't know where I heard this, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And I think what they intended to mean by that is that when we resist that which is painful, we create suffering. When we allow ourselves to acknowledge the truth that we're experiencing something painful, it's too late to wish it wasn't there. It may not look attractive. I think this is part of the problem. Message of our culture so often guide us to try to create a persona that's attractive, that's admirable, that looks good. And when we are angry or impatient or discouraged, that's not very attractive, not socially so interesting, doesn't look good. And when we embark on the yoga path, now we have a new kind of pressure to try to look spiritual also, not just look healthy and happy and intelligent and beautiful, but now to look peaceful and spiritual. So that can sometimes just create another level of stress, trying to look good. The whole idea here is accept what comes up in our experience and to ultimately find out what's beneath it, what's at the root of it. I can give a little story that I still think of from back in the days when I lived in New York. This would be before I knew you, Chandra. I think this would have been back in the early 1990s. There was a woman living at the Institute at that time. She was a good lady. She was very sincere, like all of us. She had her own quirks. And as I was getting to know her and develop a little bit of a friendship with her, I had this experience with her once where she came to me and said, I can tell you're lying to me about such and such. And I was kind of taken aback because like, what? And I tried to explain myself. No, I wasn't lying. And she wouldn't accept it. She was sure I was lying. And she said, now you're just covering up your lie with more story. And I thought, well, I was kind of indignant. Well, if I can't even, you won't even allow me to explain. You won't accept anything I say. What can I say? There's not even a use in even talking about it. So I walked off in kind of a huff. I went back to my desk. I can still picture my desk and supposedly was going back to work, but I was meanwhile kind of grumbling to myself. A low simmer in the mind, stewing about this situation. And how could she think that way? Why did she think that way? Why wouldn't she trust me? Irritated, not full-blown anger, but definitely annoyed, irritated. So this went on for a little while. And I finally realized I'm not working. I'm still thinking about all of this. And I really decided to sit with it. I was trying to embrace this idea that let me stop, as Swami Satchidananda would say, stop pointing the finger at her. And with three fingers pointing back at me, let me look at myself. What's going on in me? And the more I looked, the more I saw that really what I was really feeling, I was feeling hurt. I was offended that someone would think I was lying. And in this case, I'll admit, I can put the spin on the truth like anyone. But in this particular situation, I had not been lying. But I was hurt that she would think that way, that she wouldn't trust me. And the more that I thought about it, I saw that the reason I was hurt is because I really expected her to trust me. And the actual fact in this situation is that she didn't. For some reason, I don't know why, she didn't trust me. But I hoped she would. I wished she would. I was expecting that she would. And when I was able to realize that my own annoyance, my own being offended or hurt, was built on the fact that I hoped and expected certain thing from her and I didn't get it. I realized I can let go of that. She's not able to trust me and I don't know why. So I calmed down and I felt at peace with the situation. I mean, it definitely said something about my relationship with her, but I did go back and tell her, I'm not angry with you. I'm sorry that you couldn't trust me. I'll make an effort to really be honest with you. And but I saw that my own suffering was caused by my own expectation. So that was not a crisis in my life. It wasn't a traumatic event. It wasn't someone I was particularly close to, but it was such a good example of how my suffering, my upset, was caused by my expectation, my desire, my attachment that someone would see me a certain way. And the kind of epilogue to the story is that later I learned from her that her father had been someone who lied to her a lot. That was very common in her upbringing, that her father was deceiving her. And I can't help but think that that influenced the way that she saw me and would project it into my own behavior. So to me, that was such a striking example of how when I'm disturbed, upset, I really need to take the time to be with that feeling, allow the energy of that feeling to release, allow myself to feel it. As long as I'm feeling angry or hurt, I can't really analyze well. But if I can allow the energy to dissipate, then I can look with more clarity. But that all comes from being able to feel okay about myself, feel safe enough to acknowledge something about myself that was not very attractive. So anyway, I'm hoping that that is something that that resonates with you all. The idea of accepting difficulty as an opportunity to learn, whether it's physical pain, psychological pain, emotional upset. This is also taught in the Yoga Sutras. Before we can take a really healthy step in self-discipline, we need to know our own capacity. We need to know how far along are we? What are we ready for as a next step? We can't just take a giant leap to leading a selfless life. I remember when I first kind of grokked the concept that the core of spiritual life is to be selfless, right? To think of the well-being of everyone instead of yourself. I thought to myself, well, I'll just be selfless. It was a great intellectual idea. In actuality, that has to be a practice, increment by increment, step by step. In the golden present, Gurudev states, we develop our willpower by doing little things. He says the word little 3 times in the writing in the golden present. We develop our willpower by doing little things, meaning a step at a time. So before we can know the right step, the step that we're ready for, we have to really acknowledge where we are now, be honest with ourselves, and open to learning from our experience. Our spiritual growth exists on a spectrum. It's not black and white, and there's always room for a little more growth. You know, have you ever been on a trail in the woods or the county park, a state park, where you're going up to a kind of overlook? You know that the trail rarely goes straight up because it's too steep. So it tends to go this way and then this way, right? Switchback. That's the way the path goes to a steep mountaintop. It's not straight ahead sometimes. You have to learn this and then this, and it all balances out. And gradually, incrementally, you go up. But you keep making the effort. It's such an important aspect of healing our darkness, is feeling safe enough to look at it without needing to feel so ashamed of ourselves or without worrying so much about what other people might think. Master Swami Shivananda says it so beautifully, bear insult, bear injury, highest sadhana. Just being able to bear insult, being able to be humble enough to acknowledge mistakes to a group of people. What a relief it is to be able to be honest about it instead of trying to cover it up or put a spin on it, and try to shape ourselves to look good in front of others. Wow, that can get so tiring. You take a look at my notes as we're nearing the end of our time. Yeah, I think what I want to recommend is that between now and next Thursday, that we each practice a few of these things in a specific way. I'll make a few suggestions, and if they resonate and if it feels like it might be useful, experiment with this. One is give a name to your story, just as a way of giving it, recognizing it as something that isn't you. Anything that you can observe is an object of your attention. It can't be you. And since the mind and its story about who you are is something that you can know and it's an object of your attention. So give it a name, just as a playful way of identifying it and an easy way to then call it out. Oh, there's my story. There he is, rearing its head. Oh, if that appeals to you, give your story a name. Another suggestion between now and next Thursday, choose something that you think of that you don't associate with as spiritual practice. Commuting to work, driving the car. Traffic is often a place where many people struggle because drivers tend to be competitive and things like road rage happen. Whatever it is, pick something that you don't normally think of as part of your spiritual life and see if you can't find a way to make that a spiritual practice. Listening to someone that's boastful, driving the car, buying the groceries, cleaning the toilet, any one of these things can be spiritualized, made a part of the spiritual practice. Can you find a way to make it more enjoyable, or to put love into it, or to just think of the well-being of others, even if it's not a person, the well-being of the furniture, the book, the door, the cabinet door. Swami Ramananda used to tell the story of how when she tried practicing nonviolence in thought, word, and deed, she couldn't succeed. It was too much to practice nonviolence in thought, word, and deed. So she had to downsize the practice, and she started practicing nonviolence by not slamming doors. And that was her practical, doable way of practicing nonviolence. I like that idea of taking something very simple, mundane, and making it a spiritual practice. And then because she had become very aware of not slamming doors, it transferred from just the door to her room. It became the cabinet door and the car door and any surface, setting anything down onto another surface, the coming together of two surfaces. And that became the way that practice kind of expanded into her life. I thought it was a beautiful example that she gave. The third thing I want to recommend, besides naming your story and making something into a spiritual practice, is committing to looking more deeply into the places where you get disturbed, knowing that your mind is doing the best that it can, and that no doubt there's some root cause within ourselves that's behind any way that we struggle. Our tendency to be impatient, to be upset about something that happens, we know intellectually, we've experienced, many of us to some degree, that there is this natural sense of peace that is our nature. That's truly who we are. And it's only some desire, attachment, idea that we have can disturb us, that would make us dependent on some circumstance for our happiness. That's the point I want to make. Our happiness is independent of circumstance. If it is dependent, it's something that we've chosen even unconsciously. We've chosen to want something so much that it disturbs our ability to experience that true nature of peace. So it's just an encouragement to think of it that way. What circumstances am I depending on in order to feel peaceful and happy, contented, connected to the web of life? All right. I think we've come to our ending time. Just thank you all for your kind attention, for your comments and questions, and for just giving me the opportunity to share some of these things that have been especially important to me. And if you can come next Thursday, I'll share some more of those same thoughts. But let's conclude with chanting the Loka Samasta mantra that I think those of you online and in person are familiar with. We can chant it together 3 times as a way of sending peaceful energy, healing energy outward. So you can even feel that you're generating that energy, that peace that you want to share inside of yourself first, and then sending it out through the heart. Together, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth dispel all ignorance. Victory to that light. Jai Sri Satguru Maharaj Ki. Jai. Okay, thanks for coming.